What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Sales Remastered. I apologize if you're trying to get onto the event. There's been some technical difficulties with the whole telestream and the broadcast system that I've been using. So I had to quickly switch over just to a general live stream. I'll work out the kinks later, but I do appreciate those of you who made some time to attend this morning. And I definitely have some valuable information I wanted to share with you. And I think it's important that definitely the show must go on. So I hope to leave you with a ton of great information within the next 30 minutes that you and I are going to share together. And hopefully you can leave this live training session with enough input that will help you pick up your business in the days to come. I for those of you who maybe it's the first time you've seen any of my content, what I do is I share a lot of the sales techniques, mindset development techniques, and current modernized sales scripting and wordplay that applies and helps the loan officer who's just trying to get to that next level and who's just trying to step up their game and step up and increase their production to a point where they actually are generating the results that they got into this industry to begin with. And so I hope that you do get notification of this live stream. Again, if you went to the event, the scheduled event, there's some technical issues with the streaming. I couldn't get a strong enough feed to ensure that I was able to deliver the content. But I hope that this message finds you well. Obviously, it's Thursday morning, the 20th. And for the next 30 minutes, I hope to share some relevant content that's going to help you, regardless of what kind of agent you are, whether you specialize in refinance or you specialize in purchase. The information I'm going to share with you is not only hard to find information that is not available with most social influencers that are available online to provide guidance, like your Grant Cardones or your other largely known or widely known sales training influencers online. This is content that's actually going to apply to you if you're in mortgage banking, if you're a loan consultant, loan officer, whatever fancy name you guys want to call yourself. But the information I want to share with you is going to really apply to modern day. It's going to apply to now. And where we find ourselves currently is kind of in a position where, it's far different than where we were this time last year or this time 2 years ago. And it's basically, we're in a position where, we went from having consumers wanting our product and wanting our service to just basically dealing with a lot of window shoppers. And so depending on what industry what side of the industry you're in, whether it's in purchase or whether it's in refinance, you're either dealing a lot with consumers or you're dealing a lot with realtors and trying to, establish that relationship. And so the techniques and the lessons that I'm going to share with you in this live stream is going to apply to both. And it's really taking a step back to understand ultimately the current time, right? Because I believe that if you have enough awareness of where you stand with your product and with your service, and also the outside view, meaning from the consumers looking in and how you're viewed at in today's market. And by saying viewed at, I don't mean like, how your reputation is or how your image is. What I'm talking about is the services that you bring. And so, for example, a lot of the consumers ultimately that we deal with are coming from a market where, they're hardwired by the media to always ask for the lowest rate and the lowest payment, right? They were always hardwired to basically expect free services, regardless of what their credit score was, or regardless of, how, what type of background that they have, whether they qualified for the lowest rate or the free service. They're always going to expect that. And it's not their fault. Where we in sales or as loan officers come into kind of quite a bit of a challenge is having the patience to really kind of slow down and almost expect this. And there's a lesson that I learned from one of my mentors, and it was basically have patience for the less informed. And what he meant by that was that not everyone's going to know your language like you do. And if someone comes in kind of a little off the wall, don't take that as an invite or a to challenge you or your character or your intelligence or your integrity. You actually should take that as an invitation to educate them. And what I have found, and for those of you who've watched my content thus far, and seen my videos that are available on YouTube, on Facebook, even on Instagram, you're going to find that I have this belief of taking yourself out of the realm of being a salesman and being more of a consultant. And when you think of the word consultant, ultimately you find someone who is a consultant because they're a subject matter expert. They specialize within that specific subject. Does that make sense? So if you know, in other words, if you have a problem with a bum knee, you're not just going to see a general practitioner. In most cases, they're going to refer you to a consultant who specializes in bum knees, or you know, anything specific to a trade. And the reason for that is because number one is a consultant is there to give you information and be very direct. They're not going to be a salesman. And so if you've ever met with a physician or a specialized consultant, like a CPA or an accountant or even a doctor, what you're dealing with is someone who is an expert within their craft. So imagine if you were meeting with a doctor for the first time, and you have to imagine how that doctor is going to be talking to you. They're not going to be talking to you enthusiastic, right? Like some do, and it's because they're real cool people, but they're not trying to sell you. They're not trying to say, hey, you know, buy my program. Oh yeah, let me go ahead and get that for you real quick. They're not in that mindset. And so why I believe having this position over a salesman is most important in today's market is primarily because of how the consumers buying decisions have been wired, and ultimately the play of the internet, media, technology, social media, it all plays a role in how they're influenced and how they're making decisions. And you might be like, well, D, how does that, you know, how does that play a role? How does internet play a role? If anything, internet helps them. Well, internet has enabled us to communicate in multiple ways. Social media has enabled us to communicate in multiple ways. And so what I'm referring to is when you take in consideration that everyone is walking around with ultimately a phone, like a phone that's basically a computer in their pocket, all day long you're getting notifications, right? So all day long you're getting emails, DMs, you're getting tagged on social media, you're getting spam emails, media notices. And ultimately what this does is becomes alerts that distracts the attention of everyone, including us. And so what I've found and what I've noticed, because I believe being self-aware and understanding where you stand and kind of how you think about things and how you interpret information, is that when you're going through your day, you're being distracted by a million and one things. And so the popular question that I get a lot is, hey Daniel, how do I attract realtors? Or hey Daniel, how do I attract more clients, more consumers? And I think it really starts there, is just understanding and being aware of ultimately what you're competing with. And you're competing with a lot of these other alerts, right? And so if you think about yourself, and as you're going throughout your day, you're getting alerts and you're getting notifications all day long. And ultimately what we become, our brains and our attention, our eyeballs, they become filtering systems. And so, you know, quickly you're just like important, important, not important, not important, not important, right? It's kind of like saying junk, 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 spam, spam, junk, 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 important, right? Like it's like that flag feature. And so if it's an important information or an important email, important notification, or important call, your attention goes to it right away. Does that make sense? Whereas if it's more blended in, like it's more kind of just an advertisement, you're subconsciously, you and I, including our consumers, we're wired to ignore it and not necessarily give it as much attention because we've been hardwired to expect those alerts. It's just part of the technology game. And so our consumers operate this way. And so to answer the question, well, how do I attract more consumers? How do I attract more realtors? The real question, the underlining question is, how do I get the attention? And ultimately how you get the attention is you basically have to stand out. You have to make noise in a different way. I've said that a few times in my content, which I have a link below this video, you know, to all the social media channels. Definitely take a peek at, you know, the sales training sessions that I have, where I talk about, you know, in order to be heard, you have to make noise in a different way, or you're going to be muffled out with all of the noise around. And when I'm talking about noise, I'm not just necessarily talking about audio noise. I'm also talking about, noise that we see from just everyday words, alerts, and all these different notifications. And so I want to give you an analogy where, if you think about it, when you're walking somewhere, like let's say a public place, it could be an outdoor mall, it could be, let's say Disneyland, right? Or you could be anywhere that you just see a ton of different people. And if you notice, what really stands out or really catches your eye is someone who is different, someone who is dressed different. Maybe they're tall, maybe they're short. They catch your attention. And the reason for that is because it's not blended in with the noise. It's not blended in with the crowd or the scenery. And my point is that if when you think about it, when you go to a store, like the reason why employees or the service workers there wear something that's different, like a uniform, is to get your attention so they don't blend in. And if they get your attention, then they can help you. And ultimately, that's what we're doing, is we just want to be able to get attention, right? And ultimately, what I found is that we have a hard time in getting the attention, whether it's a consumer or a realtor, when we blend in and sound just like everyone else who's trying to get their attention. And so, for example, like a realtor is constantly trying to be distracted by loan officers and saying, hey, let me be your preferred lender, or hey, let me go and do the loans that you can't do, or hey, let me go ahead and, everyone's offering their service to the realtor, and ultimately that's selling, right? That's you're trying to market yourself, and marketing is based saying, hey, this is why I'm the best, this is why you should be, working with us, this is why you should give us your attention. And where we need to kind of shift the sales, where ultimately the sales captures their attention and is more about them, is make noise in a different way. And this would apply also to consumers. And ultimately what that is basically just becoming more of a consultant, more of an educator. And so if you think about it, like there are different media channels to communicate with the outside world. There's different media outlets to communicate with professionals, like LinkedIn. There's different media channels to connect with the younger crowd, like let's say Snapchat or Instagram. And then there's different media channels to connect with all ages, like let's say Facebook, right? If we're aware of where ultimately our audience is, then we can adapt our message to conform with the platform that we use. And so, for example, if my main priority, my main goal was to attract realtors, right? And this might be one of your primary goals too. The first thing that I would do is, number one, is be aware of what that realtor is constantly getting. You like get a lot of requests like, hey, how do I attract like some real heavy hitter realtors? Well, you have to understand, number one is what's already happening with these heavy hitter realtors. They're heavy hitters because they do a lot of business, and they become ultimately this magnet of loan officers, also of all seasons, right? Like you could be a veteran, you could be a rookie, and they're just constantly being pitched. And the last thing this realtor wants is another loan officer pitching them as to why they're the best. And ultimately, they become like that consumer, or like us, that get constant notifications where we're just kind of canceling out the noise. It's like not important, not important, not important, important. And so what I would do, if that was my primary goal, was to create more of this channel, like this medium. And it could be on Facebook, it could be on Instagram, it could be on whatever platform you decide to use, but take it away from selling. Take it away from the 24/7 pitch. You don't want to make a media channel that's all about pitching the lowest product, or DPAs, or down payment assistance. I got FHA, I got VA. It's more about information, because ultimately the reason why technology has advanced so far, and why it's relied on, and why it captures our information from alerts to social media to tags, is because there's information there that applies to us. Does that make sense? So when you think about when you get tagged in a notification, you get all these notifications on Facebook, or you get these notifications on any other social media channel. Your attention is more drawn if someone mentions you, right? Because it's applicable to you. You're more in tune. Like you'll give it your time of day to read out the entire post and analyze the picture, and you're giving it your full attention. And so ultimately what we want to do is we want to kind of have that same effect, where where if I understood that a realtor's primary goal is to create business and find leads or find shoppers and sellers, then what I would do is create a medium outlet to attract just that. And so if I had a business page that gave all these random fun facts, and these random fun facts again is just simply information, but it's all condensed and located in one centralized location. And you could do this for consumers too. It would apply for both refinance and purchase. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're just creating more or less your own lead magnet. You see, the problem is that when a lot of loan officers get into a specific niche, like let's say purchase division or refinance division, they try to hit X, Y, and Z without going through the full alphabet. And so their expectation is that, well, why wouldn't this person want to work with me, or why wouldn't this realtor want to work with me? I got the lowest rate, I got the lowest payment. I'm sharp dressed, and I look great on camera or whatever. But the truth of the matter is that you don't really offer anything that's applicable to them. And what I want you to take away from this is whatever medium you decide to build, what will attract people is information that applies to them. And so if I created this media channel that was there to educate consumers, like 5 things you need to do before you buy a house, or 3 ways to improve your FICO score fast, or how to purchase a home with minimal down payment, or how to purchase a house straight out of college. This is information that doesn't require the legal constraints for having your NMLS license, having this huge disclosure, ton of fine print. You don't need to worry about APRs because you're not selling anything. But if you look at most business pages, all it is selling. All it is like, hey, I got this property here listed for sale, or hey, I got these down payment programs. This is the interest rate, and a lot of these disclosures. And when we think about it, the notifications or the pages that we avoid are those of disclosures, because we anchor it based on a commercial, right? So anytime we're on a commercial, what do? We fast forward. So we're actually hardwired to just overlook and ignore those. Where you're going to stand out is if you catch some interesting information. That's why YouTube is so hot, is because it just gives you insider information. And so ultimately, you're just using that same concept to attract. So another thing that I want to bring up that has to do with today's current time. And ultimately why I think this is important is because I'm in sales too. Like, I originate sales on a day-to-day basis. I don't only manage a team, which I'm blessed and honored to actually manage and lead the number one team in my division. So I'm honored to hustle alongside them because I get to see what works. But more importantly, I get to hustle alongside them, and they influence me. They challenge me, and ultimately we have this unison, we have this energy, this competitive vibe, right? And what I want to share with you is something that I notice my team do, as well as something that I've been a fond preacher of. And it's a matter of just really, really having empathy and understanding ultimately the desires and the wants of the person you're talking to. And why I mention it this way is because that is primarily the main reason why a lot of business is actually lost right off the bat. Let me give you an example. So when you take an incoming lead, whether it's from a realtor, whether it's from a consumer, just anyone at all, typically what happens is when we connect, we make that first connection, what we tend to do is ask, how can I help you? Right? Or what are you looking to do today? And even though you're seasoned, or even if you're a beginner, what I have found is that question ultimately gives control of the conversation back to the prospect. And it's important to understand that when consumers call you, or you're calling a consumer and you make an engagement, it's important that we as consultants, not salesmen, we have to control the conversation. We have to drive the conversation. Ultimately, we have to have purpose of our engagement. Because if we don't have the purpose, or if we don't drive, it becomes this awkward interaction, right? And if you've ever been in a conversation where you don't understand the topic, like for myself, I don't really watch sports, right? Like, I'm just weird like that. I don't follow sports teams. I can't understand it. I don't know how I can understand some player's statistics and how well he did in practice. That just doesn't attract me. But everyone's different, right? But so when I'm in a conversation, typically with my friends, and they're talking about, this player did this thing or got signed to that. I mean, it's noise, and I'll pay attention to the highlights of the game, but I won't necessarily go so deep into it where I know this man's children's names and where they live and where they went to school. I'm just not like that. But what I would like to do, or what I do find myself doing, is I like to understand the psychology of interaction, of decision making, of persuasion, of selling versus closing. That is what inspires me. That's what I like to understand. It's the way the mind works. It's the way, our that it's the way of developing a specific mindset. Anyway, the reason why I bring this up is because if you've ever been in a conversation where you're not necessarily on the same level of those people talking, like if they're talking a foreign language to you, you're going to feel awkward at times, and you're not going to know what to say, right? The only thing that we can really do for our prospects is avoid asking them how we can help them, because if they don't know our language or they don't know how this works, the reason why they say, I'm just looking for your lowest rate, or I'm just looking for no cost, no fees, I don't want to answer no questions, is because they feel awkward. And without the empathy, we're going to allow this person who feels awkward, who doesn't know anything about the topic and is more in a defense, closed up position, to basically determine the direction and the momentum of that conversation. But here's the problem with that, though, is that typically we ask that question right when we connect, right? And so it's like, hey, it's a great day here. My name is Daniel. How can I help you? And ultimately, what we've done is we've given the microphone back to that prospect. And for those of you who've been doing this a long time, I mean, is it not the same request every single time, right? Like, what's your rate, or what's your fee, right? Regardless if they're shopping, regardless if they're window shopping, regardless of what they're doing. Most of our consumers are not in the trenches like we are. So they don't get this opportunity to understand how most consumers think like we do. You see, we do it all the time. There's day after day after day after day after day. We go through the same objections, the same exact response. And sometimes, instead of adapting and really kind of learning from the past objections and the past distractions, or the past losses that we've had in the conversation, and then adapting to become better in our future conversations, we'll actually find more comfort in just staying the same, right? Like, we don't want to do anything different. We're just waiting patiently, or sometimes impatiently, through the process of waiting for the laydown. We're waiting for someone to say, yeah, I'm looking for cash out, right? And the reason why is because today, really, the only people doing the refinance are typically those who are doing cash out. So in other words, when we start the conversation, we ask, how can I help you? And then the people say, well, I'm just looking for a lower rate. Typically, the salesman will come off and say, okay, well, what's your rate? And if they say a rate that's anything lower than 4%, we become defeated on the inside. And I'm gonna say we because I'm there with you. I'm a salesman with you. And that's exactly what you're gonna find here, is information that actually applies to your specific craft. I don't sell cars for a living. I sell what you sell. And so I know if there's anyone out there that knows what you're going through, it's me and my team. We know what you're going through. And so when we get in this position, and we let them determine the strength of the conversation or the direction of the conversation, we're setting ourselves up for failure. And so one way to really combat that is remove that question, and remove the question of like, hey, how can I help you? Because I already know, based on my experience, I already know, based on the constant conversations that I'm having, that more than likely you're looking for a lower rate. So I'm not even going to ask you. It's like me asking a question to something I already know. Of course you're looking for a lower rate. But what we need to do as salesmen, as loan officers, especially in today's market, is understand the fundamental basics of sales. And that is, the reason why they're calling you, or the reason why they would need your service, is because there is a hole to fill. Does that make sense? There's a saying where people don't buy the drill, they buy the hole in the wall. They're looking for a result. Does that sink in, right? So when people say I'm looking for a lower rate, or I'm looking for no cost, ultimately what they're doing is they're protecting two things, primarily two things. People care about these two things, and you may agree, because you care about these two things. And these two things is time and status. Again, time and status. This is why they go right to the point and say, I don't want to answer no questions. Just tell me, can you lower my rate? Can you give me a free service? And they're also looking to protect their status. So they're always going to say, my neighbor got 3.5%, or my neighbor has a 3%. You just did a refinance. I'm looking for that. How come you can't give me that? So they don't want to be the sucker on the block per se. They don't want to be the person who paid more than they need to, or who got overbooked with closing costs and settlement services. So keep that in mind. I know it's about 9:01, and we're getting on that 30-minute mark. I really want you to guys to download a copy of the sales script. The sales script will teach you the wording that will help you set up the expectation. You want to know how to remove the question of how can I help you? Do you want to know how to take control of the conversation? Because the only way for you to capture the attention is if you control the conversation. You have to control the conversation because you need to quickly find out their emotional why. And what I mean by their emotional why is, there's a saying that says people buy with emotion, but then justify it through logic. And what they're talking about is they're talking about their emotional why. And just like I had mentioned, people buy a hole in the wall, they don't buy a drill. It's because they're buying the result. For some reason, that specific result, whatever the result is, they will only say lower rate because they want to protect their status. Does that make sense? So they will only say lower rate because they don't know how to explain anything else. But ultimately what they mean is they need savings, or they need cash. They need cash or savings to solve a pain or a problem. That's their hole in the wall, right? So they may be calling, hey man, I'm looking for a drill. No, you're not. You're looking for a hole in the wall. Per se, right? So ultimately, what we have to do is capture the attention by driving the conversation, and the only way we're going to sell to that attention is if we discover their emotional why. And it's very hard to discover their emotional why if you go straight into selling. And so if you ask them like, hey, okay, well, how can I help you? I want a lower rate. Well, what's your rate? I got a 4.5. Ooh, you know what I mean? Or I got a 3.5. You're justifying their emotional why based on an interest rate, but then you're using it coming from a person who's not in the trenches as you, like you. So you're taking that request from someone who's uninformed, who's less informed. And like I mentioned at the very beginning, that quote, have patience for those who are less informed. Have patience for those who don't know what they're talking about. Because instead of seeing it as a frustration, instead of seeing it as a challenge of, oh, now I gotta sell this person on a higher rate, take it as an opportunity to learn more about them. You see, what happened was over the last couple, or I would say the last 5 to 6 years, anyone who could talk literally was able to get a license as long as you had a clean record, right? But what happened was there's a lot of people who technically did not know how to sell that were put in a position where they're able to make a good amount of income. And they didn't necessarily know need to know how to sell. They just needed at least to know how to talk, articulate, spell, send an email, and make communications. Because, well, the truth of the matter was that the product sold itself. Well, now we just have to adapt, and we actually have to be salespeople, but in a different way. And so this is why I call it sales remastered, is because all the sales information, jargon, and techniques that you've learned in the past, it's now being modernized. It's now being made current to adapt to the current time of consumers' way of thinking. I'm not giving you techniques or information that worked in 1985, right? I'm not giving you information that used to work when the market was good. I'm giving you actual science information, science proven techniques of how to capture the attention, drive leverage, figure out the emotional buy-in, and then sell to that emotion. Because the logic will come in, right? But first, there's a sequential order. So I invite you to check out the Sales Remastered. Go to salesremastered.com. At the bottom of the homepage is an area to request the sales script. Just be sure you don't use your work email, because your work domain will probably flag my domain. It's coming from Daniel@salesremastered.com. And if it gets quarantined, it's never going to hit your inbox. So use your personal primary email, an email that you can get on your phone. So that way you could save it to your phone. You could pull it up and read it off your phone. And ultimately what it is just all it is 20 years worth of sales experience refined into a script that will help you gain the traction and the leverage that you need to keep the attention and ultimately break down the guard of your prospect or anyone who you're dealing with so that you can better learn what their emotional why is. Because when you identify their emotional why, you've discovered the leverage that you need to make a sale, right? That's how you make a sale. That's how you close an actual sales transaction. So I hope you guys enjoyed this live training session. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. If you guys try to join the event but were shut off or couldn't get the connection, I'll work those kinks out. And again, this session is going to happen every single Thursday from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So share it with your team, share it with a loan officer that you want to see grow with you, and let them know that this channel is here, because I promise you, there's no other channel that's doing the content sharing like this at Sales Remastered. And if YouTube's not your channel, check me out on Facebook, check me out on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'll leave links below the video in the notes section, as well as a direct hyperlink to salesremaster.com, where at the bottom of the homepage, you can request a copy of the free sales script. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's training session. Please like, comment, and share. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.